Let's check out our bracket here on Top 8 Sunday and find out where we've been and where we have yet to go. Semi-final time is ahead of us. We have Yoshihiko Ikawa, who will be going up against Arne Huschenbett. That's a domain ramp versus Esper mid-range match. Then we have Takumi Matsuura, and they're up against Yuta Takahashi, Azorius Control versus Boros Convoke. Yuta Takahashi, your 2021 World Champion, 6 top finishes to his name, came in 12th at Pro Tour Murders at Karlov Manor, so
wow.
doing, really well at these back-to-back Pro Tours here. Let's take a look at Yuta's road here to the top 8. Went 7-1-2 in standard, so 2 draws, which was kind of rough, but only lost once on day number 2. Had a draw as well there in round number 13. That's how Yuta got here today. The opponent, Takumi Matsuura, 2 regional championship top 8s to his name. To qualify him here for this weekend, 2 top finishes, went 8-2 in standard plus 1 bye, 2-0 versus the rest of the top 8 in the Swiss portion of the tournament. Beat Ray and Arna on day number 2. All right, those are the players. What about the decks, Corey?
All right, about the decks, let's start with Yuta. It is Azorius Control, and looking at the matchups that they played, neither player has played against each other's deck so far, so Azorius Control is going to be pretty decent against these hyper-aggressive decks. The main card to look out for here is going to be the Temporary Lockdowns and the Sunfalls. If Yuta is able to find those very quickly before the battlefield gets really, really wide here from Boros Convoke, Yuta's going to be quite advantaged. So let's take a look at the flip side here. We got Takumi's Boros Convoke deck. Now, the play is going to be very important in this matchup, but something to look for is these turn 2 Knight Errant of Eos. If Takumi is able to find that and get a bunch of creatures into hand and finish it off with a War Leader's Call, Takumi is going to be really advantaged here. So the classic control versus aggro matchup here, Maria.
All right, everybody. Tale as old as time, indeed. I'm going to send it on over to Marshall and Monty in the booth here with our first semifinal.
Thank you, Maria. Welcome back to the booth here. Marshall Sutcliffe with Monty Devuti. Semifinals just about underway here in Seattle. We had very exciting quarterfinals to lead into this, and now we just have to kind of, okay, take a deep breath. And we've got something kind of refreshing here. The classic aggro versus control.
Simple, elegant, and you know, 2 players who are very good at their respective archetypes. Yuta Takahashi has been an incredible control player for the large majority of his career, opting to differentiate between some, you know, aggro control in the form of fairies, but he loves a traditional control deck. On the other side, Takumi, a Pro Tour top 8 last year, Pro Tour Phyrexia, playing mono white humans. His style is definitely the aggressive deck. So this Boros Convoke deck, right up his alley, and really plays into his strengths.
That's right. This is the 6th top finish for Yuta Takahashi, of course, our world champion for World Championship 27. Also a finalist at PT San Diego, but way back in 2007. We're talking about a vet here. This is only the 2nd top finish for Takumi Matsuura, as you mentioned. That PT Phyrexia top 8 as well.
Yeah, and Takumi has been incredibly consistent since then. He's made the day 2 of every single Pro Tour in the meantime, so may not be putting up multiple top finish results as we've seen, you know, Simon Nielsen put up, for example, but every single Pro Tour he is consistently there, putting up results, making it into day 2, making a potential run, and I don't think it's surprising to see him with an aggressive deck here back into a top 8 a year later.
Perhaps an indicator of Takumi's limited prowess as well. Consistent top 8s means you got to know how to draft.
I mean, realistically, a lot of aggressive players who like playing aggro decks in Constructed, are usually really good drafters as well, just because a lot of the elements that are important for aggro decks, being able to do combat math, being able to sequence resources and maximize those things, those are the skills of a great limited player as well.
You can see some resources being exchanged in the early portions here. March of Otherworldly Light took out that Warden of the Inner Sky, but there's still Sanguine Evangelist and Bat Friend on the battlefield. Of course, nothing there just yet for Takahashi, though this deck, let's just say it doesn't prioritize permanence inside of lands. It's a heavy spell-based deck, as you can see.
Not particularly, and I would say that this is a relatively slow start for Takumi. This is a deck that is capable of putting out approximately 3 times as many permanents by this point of the game in its best draws. But one card that is doing a lot of heavy lifting here is that Cavern of Souls on Vampire, already essentially represented 2 uncounterable creatures, which against Takahashi's exact hand, there's 1 counter spell, but does definitely provide some annoying value against this Azorius control deck in general.
Yeah, that's a good first place to land, right? Is there a cavern or no? And as you can see, Demolition Field's going to take care of it, and that's why.
Yeah, it is the type of land that you would like to get rid of if you are the control player, just to make your life a little easier. The issue right now for Yuta is with double Evangelists on the battlefield, the damage is adding up very quickly, and Takahashi's hand does not have one of those board wipes that he really needs. Doesn't have access to a depopulate specifically to be able to wipe this board and reset things, buying himself the time he needs to develop resources. I do think it's an interesting sign of this format and the reduced testing window for the players, because we do have 3 Japanese players in this top 8, all from the Moriyama Japan team, but they're all on different decks. Takumi on Boros Convoke, playing to his specialty, Yuta on Azorius Control, playing to his specialty, and then Ikawa playing Domain Ramp. So really no consensus within the Powerhouse testing team. Everybody is playing the decks that they thought were good, that worked within their play style.
I wonder if it gave them a little bit of an advantage. You know, sometimes the testing can focus a little bit too much on the decks that they're playing, the mirror match and that type of thing.
Yeah, it definitely is possible. I think a lot of teams, when you are under a time crunch, may just not be able to figure out those last few tweaks that would, for example, make their team or analyst deck feel like it is good enough to bring, so they default to Esper because it is the most established deck.
Yeah, ultimately, Yuta Takahashi was trying to withhold the relatively fair start. As you mentioned, Monty, that was not a blistering start by any stretch for what this deck can do, but the fact that Takumi could simply resolve creature after creature, he was able to just keep chipping away, and ultimately Takahashi has to pack it in. Game number 1 goes to Takumi Matsuura, and now we're going to start off with game number 2. Remember, if you're just tuning in, this is Top 8 Sunday. That means that we play best 3 out of 5 for our matches rather than the normal best 2 out of 3. It also means that the first 2 games are played without sideboards, and then any subsequent games will have sideboards. Novice Inspector is going to kick it off for Takumi as he gets his clue token. Land here for Yuta Takahashi. Neither player mulliganing in this game either, so we have both at full force.
Yeah, this hand looks better for Yuta. I do see a copy of Sunfall in it. But what it is lacking is a little bit of earlier interaction. I do believe he just picked up a copy of Phantom Interference the previous turn, so now has an earlier counterspell. But if Takumi is off to one of his better draws, then just waiting for Sunfall is not going to get the job done for the Azorius control player. You really want something like one of those 2 copies of Temporary Lockdown. Now with Takumi taking it a bit slower, playing this flash creature, passing the turn, it is going to give Yuta some time to utilize this No More Lies or this Phantom Interference and try to slow things down a bit, but not that much.
Kind of interesting there. On end step there, Yuta tapped out for Deduce, and Takumi said, hold on a sec. Nah, okay, go for it.
Yeah.
He had the Resolute Reinforcements, but decided, no, I really don't want to run this out at sorcery speed, as it were.
Right, you don't.
And there we go.
Here's the question, and there's the answer.
Okay, so that's huge. Phantom Interference is going to get that Knight Errant, and that is massive, as that is the type of card that can snowball. It adds to the board, and it's one of those things that it can be difficult to come back from without a proper sweeper.
And what is really nice, or was really nice for Yuta up until that Vantage was drawn, was Takumi was stuck on lands a bit. Certainly a little slower than he would like, though. Now Yuta missing a land drop as well, so both players a little bit of stumbling.
Yeah, and you know, really, really punishing for Yuta as the game goes on. Takumi can operate this deck off of 3 lands ideally, right?
Yeah.
Like No More is fine. No More Lies, by the way. at the same time I was talking there, is going to hit the Sanguine Evangelist. But still, the pressure's coming in here from Takumi. It hasn't been one of those overwhelming, you know, the Evangelist or hitting the Knight Errant, something to kind of push it over the top. It's just been these 3 little 1-powered creatures, but they do add up. Land drop there for Takahashi as well.
Takumi could go for the big explosive play here, can go for Gleeful Demolition, land Ibide's Recruiter, try to just present a ton of damage. And I think if you're in Yuta's seat, you probably let this resolve, save your No More Lives for the potential Recruiter, knowing that if you survive through this turn, you can untap and go land Sunfall. He does not have the 5th land right now, but if Takumi doesn't go for the Recruiter, then Yuta can go for the Memory Deluge. If he does, then he has to hope either this clue or the top deck afterwards gives him that 5th land.
Yeah, and this is why the aggressive players have to just keep pressing, is you have to force Yuta to do this, because there is a chance, he wants to find out now if he's going to hit that land, and it looks like he did.
It was an Anchorage. It comes into play tapped.
Oh, it was a tap land. He still has his draw step.
Big draw here. It's not like he's dead, but he really would like to not take the damage here.
Oh, and it wasn't a tapped Anchorage that comes in.
And
so
the
that
Seachrome
means
Coast
he's
is
going to
also
take
tapped.
another big hit. Oh, and the Seachrome Coast was the top deck. Okay.
Okay, the good news is Takumi's hand is really not adding anything. Takumi can get extra aggressive if he would like to go for an epic here and go for sacrificing that blood token to try to find something. But I think as is, you want to just present here. Yuta does have that Wandering Emperor, so can prevent some of this damage if he would like. Just play it, exile a creature to gain some life, or make an item block, depending on what you value more here. Either way, with the Sunfall, you are going to lose the Knight token, so maybe wants to prioritize some life here. Could also just go Wandering Emperor and not activate at all. Really depends how much he wants to use his life total as a resource here.
It's a question
or,
of life total or...
You do activate.
Sure, but you just mean don't do anything.
Right, because -1 here, you are paying 1 life, but you are keeping an extra loyalty on the Wandering Emperor. -2, you are not paying any life, you are gaining that too, but you're not taking a creature off the board, so your Sunfall's a little bigger, etc., etc.
Right. That's Feldarin Epicure. But this was fortunate here for Yuta, because this could have been the type of turn where Takumi either smashes for 1,000,000 or gets ahead with a Knight Errant instead. He's playing directly into the Sunfall here.
This is the type of game that Sunfall wins. Takumi has played out basically every resource he has. He has 1 land left in hand, has a blood token, and that's about it. Did scry and keep on top here with the Warden there. So whatever this card is, it is enough for him to play the 5th land as well.
And here comes Sunfall. Takumi knew that was coming. He was saying yes before that thing even went on the stack. It is 8.
All right, that's a
actually
large
a great
one.
way to win a game pretty quickly against an opponent who has nothing going.
Make another 2/2.
Except for a blood token.
All right.
You saw Takumi did play his land there. He's not able to activate the blood token. It actually does have tap as part of its ability that turn. He can now.
Ooh, War Leader's Call.
Is that what that was?
It is. So this is a bit of an issue for Yuta. Yuta's clock is very fast, so Takumi's reliance on, okay, I'll have time to draw multiple creatures and really get this ping out of the War Leader's Call, it's not really going to work, just because essentially he has 1 draw step, and this is 11 damage being presented. 2 draw steps, I guess, with that blood token, but at 7 life, Yuta's feeling very safe now. 7/7.
7 all. Can Takumi find
That's a land.
something?
Get rid of it. Try again. Last draw. Are we done here? Not quite.
Well, Darn Epicure says, no, you take 2?
Yep.
And
But
so he just needs any way to get that thing out of the way.
like that get lost in hand.
There we go.
Yuta is going to go for the Memory Deluge here, but it looks like we are heading into post-sideboard games all tied up.
So who does that favor? Is that Yuta?
It is Yuta. Yuta gets a lot better tools. I believe he has 2 more copies of Temporary Lockdown in the sideboard, and the full 4 copies, Temporary Lockdown has been an answer to the Convoke deck in Pioneer before this. It is a great answer to the Convoke deck in Standard, so it is something that Takumi has to be worried about. Yuta didn't find it in either of those pre-board games. Going up to 4 post-board is a big issue, so Takumi really wanted to put Yuta in the Ikawa position of, okay, you've lost both pre-board games, good luck.
Right. I'm just going to have one explosive draw.
You can't stumble
I get to be on the play one of these times, yeah.
Now Yuta has one to give. And look at this hand for Yuta. Already has a Temporary Lockdown as well as a Sunfall as the follow-up after the reset. So this is an excellent start to Game 3, the first post-board game for Yuta. And Takumi mulliganing is never where you want to be on the play here against the control deck, where you need to have refuel after refuel.
Feels just like a very hostile environment for Takumi.
It's not great. This card is one of the all-stars post-board.
Invasion of Gobakon?
Yeah. As you say, you can't Invasion of Gobakon on the top of my deck.
Been saying that for years.
For years. Actual decades, really. That's how old we are. But looking at the hand here, Temporary Lockdown is in the hand, so Takumi can take that and very much slow down Yuta's ability to interact. And that Gobakon can really scale out of control if you can attack it enough to transform it.
Okay, that's interesting. That is a game changer potentially for Matsuura here.
We do also know that he has access to that Resolute Reinforcements in addition to the 2 Warden of the Inner Skies and a land. So plenty of ways to present more pressure here, but can't flip the invasion this turn.
How does Invasion play against sweepers?
Really well against Depopulate,
Okay.
but doesn't really do anything against Sunfall or Temporary Lockdown, which both exile. All it does is continue growing your board and presenting a much more problematic clock.
I see. So it can turn, like you said, like a card like Resolute Reinforcements into a board state of its own.
Exactly. And one issue, well, you know, it's not really an issue, but one sad note for Matsuura is Yuta isn't playing any Depopulates. There's only 3 Sunfall in the main deck, 0 copies of Depopulate in the sideboard as well. So as good as the invasion is, it's not protecting you against the board wipes of Yuta's deck.
It always feels weird that they have to attack, you know, not the player. Like the Boros play, I mean, it must pain them, right?
Yes and no. This Boros Convoke deck, a lot of the time, is not a deck that wins by 1s and 2s. It's a deck that puts out a lot of 1s and 2s, but it wins by chunks of 7 and 10.
Okay. And it's well worth the 2 damage.
Right. Like, this is a deck that regularly taps their creatures to convoke Knight Errant of Eos or activate the Warden of the Inner Sky rather than attacking. So putting some damage into Invasion of Gobakon is not actually a cost. It is a cost, but it's not a cost that the Boros Convoke deck is unhappy to pay.
Okay.
It is part of their regular game plan that they are buying into by playing the deck.
Takumi now has Warden of the Inner Sky to go with the Novice Inspector. Knight Errant of Eos in hand, 3 untapped lands though for Yuta.
Yuta has the Tidebinder, so even though no counter spell for the Knight Errant of Eos, can use that Tidebinder to protect, and notably can also use the Tidebinder to
Block.
protect this invasion of Gobakon from transforming. Yes, and I think this is what Yuta is about to ask is, when this goes to transform, can I use Tidebinder to stop it from transforming? And I believe the answer is yes, and it goes to the graveyard.
That is exactly what Yuta Takahashi is asking.
Trigger on the stack. If I counter trigger ability, how it works?
He said, if I counter the trigger, how does it work?
It stays on the battlefield. So this trigger does not do nothing. Do nothing. So it stays. It's still on the battlefield. Have no counter, but no counter. Don't flip. No. Not correct, but let me double check. Yeah.
He wants to double check that it goes to the graveyard.
Yeah, I
or
believe
if it just stays on the battlefield with no text.
we got a note earlier
Or
on.
no counters, I mean.
We got a note earlier on that this interaction, I believe, does work in the way that the battle is put into the graveyard as a state-based action. I don't believe the battle can remain on the battlefield with 0 counters on it. So one of 2 things has to happen. But we will allow, of course, the judge staff to double-check, confer, and give the players the official ruling.
Takumi. He knows what's going to happen.
I feel like Takumi understands how the
This
interaction
triggers
works.
only when you remove the last counter. So
Yeah,
if there's no
if
counters,
no counter, no target.
stays there.
Okay.
ゼロになりました。誘発を
ダメージ取って
ゼロになって誘発、それをカウント。
Trigger on the stack.
そうするとゼロになるまま、もう変身できない。
できない。
The judge has ruled that the battle does remain on the battlefield with 0 counters. It will not be transformed.
And if you attack it again, it doesn't satisfy the clause.
I don't believe so. I think the battle has already been defeated. Part of the defeat is the removal of the last counter on it. Though, of course, we were told that this would work a little differently.
Yeah.
So I'm not 100% certain on it.
Right.
But we have no impact on the match in progress. So whatever
course.
the judge ruling was, it will continue on.
It will stand. And it is a very similar outcome in the sense that effectively that card is nullified.
It would be astronomically different if the battle was able to be attacked again and transformed. That would be an issue. But assuming the battle can't be attacked here, it is more or less the same outcome. It isn't really like this Boros Convoke deck is
Fine.
using the
Thank you for that,
graveyard
yeah.
to return this invasion of Gobakon in some way.
Okay, still nice board here for Takumi Matsuura, and a Sunfall would do just fine here for Yuta Takahashi, thank you.
Has the untapped land. Important. Yuta also drew the Filigree Silex, which I believe is the Ratchet Bomb-esque card from
Right.
Phyrexia All Will Be One.
Right.
So very much the same style of tap to put a counter on, sacrifice to destroy exactly
Things
converted
that
mana
cost that
cost,
much.
the mana value. But it also has that, win condition clause of, oh, have you just been growing, maybe doing some proliferation? Probably not happening in this format. Well, Tenyu.
I like that. I mean, people used to proliferate opposing ratchet bombs out of the range of what they
Yep.
wanted it to be. This one gives you a little bit of a runway there.
Did you ever 10 someone with that card unlimited?
With this card?
Filigree
No,
Silence.
I never did. No.
Okay. I see you don't live ambitiously enough. Whatever. it's fine.
I'll try harder next time.
We're different people. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
That is true. Okay, so Takumi's going to get a scry here off of the Warden. Pass the turn back. There's Memory Deluge, but this is bad news for Takumi.
Yeah, this is... Oh, and I think Yuta found another temporary lockdown should he want it, which I don't even know if he needs, because at this point, once the field comes down, first Sunfall will happen. The entire board will get wiped. Then there is a temporary lockdown that has a 2-mana tax on it, but for 5 can still come down, plus the Filigree Silex in hand, plus a March now picked up, and that means that Yuta is well set up to remove the next 2 board states
Wow.
that Takumi presents in this spot.
And right now he's on double Epicure and a Clue.
Yeah. And that is really hard to come back from if you are Takumi.
Interestingly, you can sacrifice clues even if they're tapped. They don't have a tap clause.
Blood tokens do. You do need to pay 1 and tap them. Clues you do not. So you can very much use those clues for cards like Warder of the Inner Sky and then sacrifice it.
Man, this matchup feels... I mean, Takumi did take a game, but like...
It's definitely in Yuta's favor. It's in Yuta's favor a little pre-board and a lot post-board.
Yeah, so you said, how many copies of Sunfall did you say?
3 copies of Sunfall in
And
the
what
main.
about...
2 lockdowns in the main.
2 lockdowns.
2 more lockdowns in the board, plus this 1 filigree Silex. It's a lot. Tishana's Tidebinder does quite a lot of work. One of the big cards for Matsuura is one that he hasn't seen yet, but we have seen do a lot of work in like the Esper mid-range matchup, Urbrask's Forge. That's a harder one for Yuta to answer and can do a lot of work, but it's not a card that Takumi has seen so far in this match.
Yuta's going to prioritize attacking here. He wakes up his incubator token and attacks. Because this is 2-turn clock, Takumi has to respect it. There's filigree Silex as well. Although he does have nicely spaced out mana values with this Resolute Reinforcements, the 0, 1, 2.
Yeah, but
he's going to take the creature down, and then that will also clean up the 2 blood tokens.
But it comes at a cost. I don't know if Yuta realized that he was blowing up his own Incubate token, because he blew that up really fast without picking up his token until Matsuura pointed it out. So I'm not going to say it was a blunder. I'm not sure if it was.
But a 7/7 just getting tossed.
A 7/7 was tossed at the cost of a little bit of life save for Yuta. The big thing really is now Yuta has Memory Deluge, has the Anchorage, and any of these board wipes that Yuta was going to cast, whether it's the Temporary Lockdown, whether it's the Sunfall, whether it is that Filigree Silex, unless you bump it up from 0, was going to take out this Incubate token.
Right.
And it really doesn't change the fact that Yuta is significantly ahead right now.
Looks like the judges may be having a quick word.
We may be revisiting the invasion situation.
Oh, sure.
I'm not entirely certain. We are going to wait and see what this is about, but...
I saw Yuta did point at that invasion of Gobakon. He probably said, you know, you can't invasion the Gobakon top card of your library.
I mean, Yuta is one of the old school guys.
He knows all.
We have been saying this for decades.
Yeah, it looks like they may be revising.
Yeah, if I counter this trigger ability, how it works to him.
Okay, okay.
Counter down to 0, trigger, I counter trigger ability, how it works to him.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. So this actually should go to the graveyard when it has 0. So was there any impact to the game here? Anything?
Anything.
No.
No.
Okay, all right. Just continue playing. Okay.
All right. No harm done.
Good catch there by the judge staff. Yep.
And it is relevant, by the way, whether it stays or not. I did think of irrelevance, which is if Yuta was to go for March of Otherworldly Light, that would exile that invasion of Gobakon if it was still in play. Well, then if Takumi was able to destroy, Temporary Lockdown.
Yeah.
And then if Takumi was able to destroy the Temporary Lockdown, the Gobakon would come back into play and trigger with counters on. So
great point,
there
Mark.
was a relevance of catching it. Fortunately, it didn't come up yet, but the fact that it was caught before it had that impact, really nice.
Yeah, great point. Okay, so back to watching Takumi try to rebuild in the face of multiple sweepers.
Yeah, notably, just before that judge call happened, Yuta was resolving a flashback Memory Deluge, looking at 7 cards and picking the best 2. So Takumi knows that he is in a pretty deep hole right now.
Field of Ruin now.
The fact that these Restless Anchorages, without being spun up into creatures, can blank the entire offensive force from Takumi is extremely impactful here.
Really good. Yeah, Restless Anchorage has been one of the more impressive cards this weekend for sure. Multiple decks taking advantage of that creature land.
Yeah, really, Tale as Old as Time of creature lands, allowing these control and mid-range decks to play the trade resources game plan that they love to execute and have liked to execute for a very long time. And then once they've gotten the game to a stable place, that's when suddenly this resource activates and starts providing value, usually at the beginning cost of a tap land.
That's right. Well, now we have not just a stabilizing force here, but Yuta Takahashi, in fact, just taking the lead.
Yeah, and has the counter
Valkyrie
for the recruiter.
Here.
Yeah.
And that's going to be enough. Yeah, that Valkyrie's enough to, as long as you can protect it, the game ends in just a few turns. And that is game number 3 going to Yuta Takahashi with the Azorius control deck. Now, we're going to get a chance to see Boros on the play here in a must-win situation. Does Takumi have one of those explosive opening draws?
It's a 6. It's not that explosive, but it has an Epicure and a Knight Errant, and perhaps most importantly, it has an Urabast Forge. Now,
It's very annoying for control players. It just spits out a threat every single turn.
Gleeful
and it gets
Demolition
worse and worse.
would have been the dream draw there. Unfortunately, just an Imidane's Recruiter, so it is going to be a turn 2 pass from Takumi, but has some of the annoying tools.
Land go from Yuta Takahashi. Another Epicure, the Knight Errant still here. First things first, though, chip in for 1. There's Mirix.
Mirix is another one of those annoying cards for Takumi, much like the Urabast Forge, where as Yuta stabilizes, Takumi will be able to pass more turns and just make a might. Okay, you have to deal with this. The damage will start adding up. The good news for Yuta is his deck is playing a lot of Field of Ruin-esque effects. I believe there's 3 copies of Field of Ruin as well as the 1 copy of Demolition Field. So he has the ability to get rid of the annoying lands like the Mirix, like the Cavern of Souls, that can make the game a little harder to play for Yuta.
March of Otherworldly Light will take out one of the Epicures. Not a huge deal, but it does usually in this case would prevent a Knight Errant of Eos from coming down this turn without a land.
Gobakon.
Oh, there it is, Invasion of Gobakon.
More like Nobakon. Counter that.
This is going to get Tidebindered.
I think it's going to get Phantom Interference, probably.
Oh, Interference, right.
Tidebinder does block the damage nicely, so I could see Yuta just go for the Tidebinder to use the mana efficiently here.
Okay, it is going to be Tidebinder.
まあ、3は3ですよね。
So that means the Epicure is going to have to stay home.
The hits keep coming for Yuta.
What did he find now?
Picked up a temporary lockdown.
Okay.
Definitely not bad to fire it off there. You do get at least 1 blood token plus the Epicure and the Gobakon. But I think just being able to pass with Memory Deluge up, and whatever Takumi does, you at least have this 4 mana instant on the end step to continue building up your hand and knowing what you can untap into. Feels pretty great in this spot. Bye-bye, Forge.
That's huge also for Yuta, as you mentioned, one of the more annoying cards to have to deal with, and that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Counter it before it even hits. Ooh, look at this Memory Deluge now from Takahashi.
Yeah, Yuta really can't afford to miss land drops in this spot when you have these Sunfalls to build up to and you have Deduce. So at the point where you're not representing anything of value or meaning anyways, you may as well just go, okay, I'm going to main phase this. The shields are down, but I have the Sunfalls in this lockdown for anything that comes down that isn't specifically Urbrass Forge. And if Forge comes down, then I didn't have a counterspell for it anyways. So you do what you got to do. I will then untap and rebuild.
So it ended up being Imidane's Recruiter attack the battle, but the Tidebinder is going to trade off for the Recruiter, meaning that it only takes 2 from the Epicure that was left over.
I think you'd have picked up another Tidebinder as well, so.
Oh, you're right.
Just perfect here.
And there's the lockdown. Down to just 3 lands on the battlefield now for Takumi, and Yuta's at a very nice 16 life.
Yeah, Takumi was tapped out as well, so got both blood tokens there. Takumi can't use it to fix the hand at all, and now Gleeful Demolition off the top doesn't have a target, so really Yuta just continuing to do what Control does, which is slowly tighten the Constrictor around its opponents when you get to this point. It's slow, it's painful, and eventually you just have to tap out. But when you're in a Pro Tour top 4, you're not going to tap out early. You're going to fight until you know there is no more fight to be fought.
That's right, but Yuta Takahashi with double Sunfall, Tishana's Tidebinder, and an Island, plus a Clue token is looking pretty good right now.
And let me tell you, he picked up a Field of Ruin, so that's the last we're currently worried about it thing. I think that resolves. You countered the trigger, you Field of Ruin the Mirex from Takumi, and then you untap and you go Sunfall. And
then it's extraordinarily difficult for Matsuura to come back.
Takumi's hand is just a Novice Inspector. And he's been playing this great. It's just, it's such a tough battle for this Convoke deck. They have the tools, but they don't have enough of the tools. And, you know, that is an issue that some of the players I was speaking to coming into this event were talking about with Boros Convoke. You have an incredible Game 1 deck. Game 1, you're favored against almost the entire field. But post-board, with all these resources that people can have access to, it can just be too tough. And I think that is highlighted most of all in the top 8 when there's up to 3 post-board games.
Right.
You really do have to survive a slog of answers, and a lot of the time that's just a big ask.
Yeah, they also know they're very well prepared for the matchup. They will have either tested themselves or had teammates testing on their behalf against your specific list.
Novice Inspector cracked the clue, but I think the writing is slowly appearing on the wall here for Takumi.
Yuta Takahashi very close to advancing out of the semifinals. What an incredible run for him.
Just fantastic.
Still
tournament.
here.
You know, it's funny because in the World Championship that Yuta won, he started out 0-3 in draft and then went undefeated and constructed to win. And there was this
incredible run.
There was this huge narrative that Yuta is a constructed master, which he is. But that weekend was an anomaly because Yuta is also a fantastic limited player. And when he started out this weekend at 3-0, it was like, uh-oh.
And he
Yuta's
loves
back.
this type of deck as well. He gets to cast No More Lies here. And now we're going to see him flashback Memory Deluge, too.
I think Takumi is very close to the concession. You can see the smile on his face. As
He does look resigned here. What
They
a
bite their
brutal
dog.
matchup. The only game he won was the one where Yuta kind of did nothing.
Yeah. It really is how it goes.
It is looking like Takumi's going to have to settle for his second top finish. But it was PT Phyrexia where he made his other top 8. That wasn't that long ago. This is a very good sustained run for Takumi Matsuura. And we will certainly be seeing him again. But it does feel like the end of the road for him, especially as now he's the one who's being attacked. And when you see an Azorius control player start to turn things sideways, it means they feel like they've got a really good shot of keeping this thing under wraps.
They really do. And, you know, just really great stuff. I'm actually curious because you didn't mention having teammates test for you. I am curious, when the players are on the same team, what did
Who
the
for
team
who?
do? Did they split into factions of the Yuta faction and the Takumi faction? How did things go in
I
the
know how I
Moriyama
would
Japan
result.
testing house
I
last
would
night?
draft.
Oh, you would draft?
I would draft. You know, Yuta gets pack one, pick one from the rest of the team to test on his behalf while he sleeps. Takumi gets the wheel. That could probably cause some fights. Yoshin frontliner here for Matsuura will allow him to put a counter and scry one on the Warden, but this is way too little, way too late.
Yeah, and I believe with just the land in hand, Takumi has absolutely nothing. So if Yuta were to go for it here, as just cracking the Silex as well, turns the creature online. This is 7.
Down to 1.
Down to 1.
Gets a map token as well.
Wandering Emperor, we'll keep that on top.
Sure.
Has a Mirex, has a Field of Ruin.
And that
Takumi
should
draws.
do it. Yuta Takahashi advances to the finals. He is through the semis. Azorius Control taking up our first seat there.
Really, really clean stuff from both players. It's such a tough matchup for Takumi. I think he really did everything he could, but as much as the aggro master had the aggressive deck in hands, Yuta is the control master. And
yeah, super tough. I mean, it's
Had the
hard to
matchup.
watch, right? I mean, it's just because you know you have so few options, right, with a deck like that, where it's kind of designed to just put everything on the table. It maybe has one reload to do it again, but all those sweepers really caught up with them.
yeah, they really did. And I wish I was in the green room so I could see Riley and Cedric's reaction to that match, because I think it would have been pretty delightful just watching Riley be very stoic about it and definitely not gloating at all as the blue-white control player wins.
Well, and Cedric handling it like the true gentleman that he is.
Yeah, Cedric
Good
would
match.
just
Both teams played
also
hard.
be very stoic, I think.
That's right. I'm sure that's exactly what was going on back there. Well, we've got Yuta Takahashi with Ailey right now.
Yuta Takahashi has picked up another victory here in our top.